alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host. Oh, geez, I can't even speak today. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is returning champion of the podcast, Paul E. Cooley. Welcome back.
Thank you, Tim.
I shouldn't say champion necessarily. He's more like a heel in the wrestling sense.
A heel in the wrestling sense. You're going to have to explain the reference.
A heel is like a bad guy. Heel is a bad wrestler. The guy that the good wrestlers are supposed to beat at the end of the story arc.
Okay, yeah, I'll accept that mantle.
But I'm not a face. I'm not a face at all, which is why we don't do a visual version of this podcast. Anyway, Paul, for those who haven't heard you on this podcast or the Dead Robot Society, which is a great podcast people should be listening to, or your own shows, what should people know about your work and who you are?
I've been podcasting original fiction for over 12 years now. I'm the two-time Parsec Award winner of the Black series and Derelict Saga. I write, alternate history, some fantasy, suspense thrillers that usually involve monsters and very bad things. Pretty much always slant into the horror realm, but I'm not a big gore guy. I'm more along the lines of what is behind that door and when is it coming to eat me kind of writer. So basically, those are the kinds of stories I'm most well known for, I should say.
Absolutely,
but, I have a great love of science and try and include it in my work whenever I can.
Yes, definitely, and that it really does come across in your more recent releases. That's for sure. You know, the Derelict Saga. Yeah, it's the one that. And I've heard you talk about a lot of stuff that isn't out yet on the Dead Robot Society, which, I mean, full disclosure, I am a patron of over on Patreon. But it's interesting because lately you've been thinking a lot about AI as far as I know, right? Artificial intelligence is kind of growing more and more to be in your wheelhouse thanks to the Derelict Saga and other stuff. So, what's so fascinating about that? I mean, other than practically everything, but what fascinates you in particular about it?
Okay, so we're a long way away from the kind of stuff I talk about in Derelict, but you can already see machine learning is really starting to make grounds in everything from education to biology to finance to basically everything. You don't even want to know the kind of crap they're doing with it for military simulations and everything else. If you've seen the movie War Games, you get a feel for what could ultimately trigger something nasty. But it's most useful to me because I'm really interested in what we're going to do with artificial life. We are on the precipice of being able to create artificial organisms, and that really scares the shit out of me in a lot of ways because we have not developed any kind of ethics or morality around what the rights are of these things. Imagine if they become sentient. What would we do? How would we use them? Would they be slaves? Would they be seen as partners? Would they just be seen as things? It allows me to really kind of dig into a lot of the problems that I think we're going to come into, and also use it as a foil for social commentary and the rest of it. As far as at one point do the machines flip the tables? And it doesn't have to be a type thing where they're out to destroy you. It's more along the lines of when and what are they going to do when they decide that they want to be free of the yoke of humanity?
Right.
And how that changes just everything. Plus, there's nothing better than having a creepy AI in a horror setting. Because I really love the games like Dead Space and whatnot. And the idea of having a sentient personality being your actual antagonist while you're trapped on a ship that it controls is just fascinating to me.
Oof, yeah. That does add that to the "it will not end well" list.
Yeah, because this will not end well.
Yeah,
for anybody.
Exactly. So yeah, no, that's a really good answer. Honestly, I think one of the more interesting questions that you pointed out there is what will people do if we're able to eventually create something that's as smart as us or smarter, that is sentient, that has its own motivation, really, and is independent in a way.
At the time where you have an organism being able to verbalize, or in some analog of verbalization, to say "I think, therefore I am," or start using the word "I" and have intent, then essentially you are dealing with something that is on our level, even if its education is rather rudimentary, or even if its logic is rather rudimentary by comparison. The bottom line is, at that point, you are mucking with sentient life. I mean, you're less likely to eat a cow if it's going to talk to you. If you want to see an example of that, read Douglas Adams's Restaurant at the End of the Universe. It's kind of creepy to have a cow walking up to you that's been genetically engineered to want to be eaten.
Oof,
okay, there's just something wrong about that entire concept. And the reason why it's so funny in Adams's universe is because Arthur is so shocked by it, as the reader should be shocked by it, because it is such an unsettling idea. It'd be like the lobster, saying, "I'm the big lobster. You guys paid for me. I'm now going to jump in the pot."
In fact, it's almost identical for that. It's like just point out his best features before you eat him. Yeah,
exactly. So you got a bunch of lobsters basically table dancing for, "Ooh, pick me, I want to be eaten." There's just, what the hell have you done to this?
Yeah, it's like the claw machine from Toy Story. It's like that. It's like that claw. Except in this case, it would actually be a death cult. It would be literally, we are getting pulled out of here to be eaten.
It's basically mandatory suicide baked into the genetic makeup and personality of these creatures, and that is just. It violates about every ethic I can think of, but
which
I'm
is
sure
funny
if we get to the point, we'll cross it.
Yeah, but there are creatures like that already, which is crazy. Like octopi, they just give up their lives, but they do that to reproduce, which is the funny part. I mean, in that sense, it makes sense. It's like, okay, they're just going to give up their lives. Evolutionarily, they will sacrifice. They just stop eating, and then to defend their young until they're basically, and then they're gone. They just starve to death. They never eat again once they have their children in a lot of cases with those species.
It's interesting you bring up octopi because they are probably 10,000 times more intelligent than we give them credit for. They may possibly be the most intelligent creature on the planet, apart from us.
Really? Although, even more than dolphins or elephants or whales?
Yes.
Wow, terrifying. I had no idea.
They taught one to use a camera.
Oh my. Okay. Well, that's a different level. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's also, what are their brains like? I don't know a whole lot about octopus beyond what they, a few facts here and there.
Their brains are weird. If you start looking at things and doing the science, they're kind of like, well, if there's an organism that came from another star system or whatever, this is it.
Yeah.
And octopi have, Scott Sigler's played with them in Earth Core to a certain degree. And they are fascinating in so many different ways because of the way they move, the way they act, their defense mechanisms, the way they see and use their environment. And plus, their tentacles they can do anything with them. They can hold, they can grasp. They're the only animal I can think of that is at least as dexterous as we are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the big thing. Chimp. And that really sets them apart from like the other sea creatures with the huge brains, like whales and dolphins.
Right. So they're a much more utilitarian, for lack of a better term, organism.
It's like they were designed for a horror movie in a way, though. Like, if you look at them, like they can squeeze through tiny spaces. Oh, you're not safe in there, buddy. It's that kind of weird stuff. Like,
Yeah, and they have nasty teeth too. So it's like, I don't want to end up in that maw. Thank you very much. So if you want to go crazy, you just imagine a giant space octopus flying around, coming to eat your face. That's kind of a terrifying idea.
H.R. Geiger came up with some pretty scary creatures, but no octopus. Like you didn't have to. It was already there.
No.
But the thing is, once you do that, once you see the octopus, like, well, that's almost as scary as anything I can imagine. If you make it big enough, anyway.
Or just screwy enough. I mean, they change colors. They can do all of that crazy stuff and camouflage themselves.
Regenerate.
And immediately and leap and regenerate and leap into action. And the fact they have no bones is just nuts.
That they have. That's the other thing. It's like, so we're going to create a creature that's like arbitrarily. We just take away one thing, right? That take away the bones, the skeleton completely. And and then it has a lot of the other features you might expect from a normal animal, but then it's. I mean, I love octopi, but they're creepy. Yeah, they're very fascinating animals. That's for sure.
If I was going to try and deal with if I was going to make a book that had an actual alien race in it, I think I'd really have to look at octopi in a big, big way.
Yeah, maybe not even. I'm now beginning to agree with you about that. I'm not saying I would make an 8-limbed or even a squid-like creature. I think, but just use the principle of like, this is why this thing is so good at what it does. And this is all the weird abilities it has, and then kind of come up with equivalents. That's kind of how I try to make original stuff for fantasy and science fiction when I write it. I'd say like, okay, what if this, say, for example, actually, this was the book I wrote a few years ago, actually a long time ago, back when I was a teenager, that was kind of inspired by the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, which I just watched and didn't like the ending of. I thought it was ridiculous and stupid, and I still kind of thought it ruined the show. Anyway, whatever, they ran out of money. I don't blame them too much for it, but whatever. Point is, that show is about giant robots fighting aliens, basically.
Right.
And I thought, because the things I liked about it were the fact that the aliens would often come out of the water, come out of the ocean, because they just, if they weren't flying, they generally came out of the water somewhere to attack the city. And I liked that. I liked that vibe. And the fact that also there were these, and at the time I was a teenager, there's these teenagers who have to pilot giant robots. But I'm like, well, giant robots are silly. At the time, I was not a huge anime fan. I was not into the giant robots as much. I'm like, yeah, but those don't physically make sense. So what if, instead of fighting giant monsters, and instead of having giant robots, we had a team that piloted shape-shifting armor and shape-shifting Iron Man suits, basically, that could grow additional matter. It made sense in the setting because I came up with some super science for it. But then the aliens they were fighting were also shape-shifting sea creatures. So it was pretty ridiculous because they were all kind of tied together in that way. And that one, I really want to go back to that setting someday because it was on the verge of being a horror story, and it actually touched on a lot of the stuff we talk about now. Like there was artificial life forms in it that the humans were creating to replace these teenagers. Obviously there were a lot of equivalencies, but like I said, I replaced the robots and I replaced the whininess and the weird metaphysical shit mostly with other stuff. But I did but that's just on the story level, right? Like instead of having giant aliens, I had sea creatures, So, but I guess my point is that's kind of a surefire way to take a story and make it completely different than the previous story, but to get some elements you really like in there or use them in a way you want to use them as an author. That's just my random tip for the day.
In Derelict, I chose, so Derelict kind of depends on a song called Natural Science by Rush. Mm-hmm. And the idea I had was looking at all the analogous life forms in the ocean that I could basically take into space and make them work that way. And that was a lot of fun because most people don't even know what's sitting on the bottom of the ocean floor or have any kind of idea what's really down there. Especially when you get to serious depths, because I kind of covered that in the black a little bit too. But the way they're designed is so alien in nature to what we see or think of as fish, or what we think of as a normal sea creature, because of the pressure that they're under, because they've never seen light. They're just live in a completely different biosphere. Their biome is so alien to us, it's not something we could ever survive in. And we haven't explored jack as far as the undersea stuff that goes down, 3 or 4 kilometers, because we just don't really haven't had the technology until relatively recently. And the ocean is a damn big place. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of being able to grab something that I can see, that I can go look up on any biology channel and go see how that creature reacts, and then kind of tinker with that to make it more me, is an easy way to come up with creatures and come up with a setting. If you imagine dark matter as an ocean, for instance, well, you can start carrying things around. But if that, by the same token, if that's an ocean, it has tidal pools, it has waves, and it has tides.
I must confess, I'm a little behind on Derelict, so this is really scaring me with what I already know. I finished Marines. I'm still a little bit into Tomb, but okay, that's already making me kind of feel the dread Let me put it that way.
It's just a matter of if you try and, as a writer, I look at stuff like that and figure out how I'm going to use it to something else, or I get inspired by something. While I was writing The Black, I got really inspired by the crazy stuff that's down there. You know, the flashlight fish and man, there's just so many bizarre life forms. Even giant tube worms.
Yeah,
they're just so bizarre, and they give you so many ideas about how to make creatures that are seemingly familiar, but they have that uncanniness to them that makes you just shiver. Because when you imagine a starfish where the center of it's just one big giant mouth with serrated teeth and tentacles that can basically grab you. It changes the dynamic of everything, even though it's something familiar. You're twisting it enough to make it into something unsettling. And for any kind of book where you want to get that suspense and you want to get that dread, you want to make sure that these things, when they finally show up, are as nasty and horrible as possible. It's even better if they're amorphous to where you can only see the shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get the details when they're really, really too close to you. Those are the kind of Cthulhu-esque, or I should say Lovecraftian. Lovecraftian features are items I try and drag out of those kinds of works and put those in my own, because it's better to leave it up to your imagination than it is to completely describe it.
Absolutely. That's why Lovecraft kind of still holds up in some regards, because he's not really that good at description, but actually works for him sometimes, because he's not going to all this detail of like, this is how big it was and so on. Yeah.
And I think imagine, especially if you watch the latest Color from Outer Space that they did on Shudder, which I highly recommend. It was just well done. Besides the fact that it has Nick Cage in it, and Nick Cage being Nick Cage, it's a really well done movie. But it has that idea that color hurts. That the color itself is so bizarre that it basically hurts your brain. It's something your brain isn't supposed to see, but for whatever reason, you're seeing it. And it starts to have effects on you. And then there's other things that it does to the surroundings around you to make it weird. And that's the fun of Lovecraft. That's the fun of cosmic horror in general. Is something so incredibly alien and familiar that at the same time that it does defy description. And that's why you get gibbering characters who are just, screaming because they've seen this thing that they can't really describe, but portions of it were familiar enough to recognize. And so you get this puzzle piece, broken puzzle, and where you've only got some of the pieces and you can only see some of the features, and the rest of it's just indescribable. And that's a lot of fun. That's a great place to play. And if you've read The Black, then you know that I love shapeshifters as well. And I got that from John Carpenter's The Thing more than anything else, which I guess I'm going to carry through on all my horror stuff. It's just,
go on.
Yeah. Shapeshifters are fun because if it can change into any form at once, then it's all based on utility. It's all based on what does the situation need.
Yeah.
Am I swimming? Okay, I need fins. Am I trying to grasp prey? Then I need pseudopods that can act like arms. Are we in a terrestrial environment? Then I want to move like a spider because they can move really, really fast. They can crawl walls. It's all about an evolution inside the organism itself, figuring out exactly how to solve whatever problem it's given. And that means that it's infinitely configurable and infinitely terrifying because it can basically take and do things that we cannot.
And it also makes you wonder how smart it is too. It's like how much it's all based on that. How clever is this creature going to be? How quickly will it solve the problems we throw in its way as it tries to chase us down?
Yeah, and that's the other thing is how do we stop this thing when it's as smart as we are? Mm-hmm. And that's just so much fun. I'd rather deal with those kind of creatures than the dumb swarm of whatever. It's a lot more fun when there's intent, when they have some kind of programming, some kind of instinctual way of dealing with issues that makes us just sit there and go, oh, we're so screwed. That's just
how did
that's
they cut the
fun
power of their
this stuff.
animals? But in this case, it's even weirder. It's like that'd be the mindless swarm. How did they cut the power of their animals? They're smarter than you thought, but if it's a creature you can barely even understand what it's doing, and how it's going to kill you when it gets you, you just know you don't want that to find out,
Or even what it's made of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, basically, I like to use physics, biology, and chemistry and then throw them out the window. So the humans are trying to describe everything in the science that they understand, and what they're trying to study doesn't fit that. It's outside of those realms. And so suddenly you get to a point where they're grasping at straws, and the only way they can figure things out is by observation. And observation's a damn difficult and dangerous thing to do, because that means you got to be close to this thing and you don't know what it's capable of.
And that thing, as we've said before, is as smart as you are and trying to do the same to you, probably.
Yeah, except maybe you are the typical arrogant human who doesn't believe anything is as smart as you until it, starts doing stuff.
Yeah, and you use a lot of different point of views in your books, actually, and I can see that, as in you've got a lot of characters usually with multiple points of views in a lot of these more recent books, at least. You've got a bunch of different point of view characters in Marines. Those the latest one I've read, which is obviously awful. I need to go back and educate myself. But you go back, but in the Black, there were quite a few POV characters in that as well as some not POV non-characters, like the fish and stuff. Yeah. But I'm just wondering, how big a fan are you? I mean, this is kind of a leading question, but I don't care. It's my show. How big a fan are you of dramatic irony? How much do you love dramatic irony, Paul?
I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Yeah, this is not a multiple choice test. Yeah. But yeah, no, because it is, I've got to say, ever since I started writing high fantasy, epic fantasy, because I've always written high fantasy pretty much. But now that I have more than one point of view in each book, I'm like, oh, this is kind of hard to beat. It's hard to top the ability for one character to do something, and you're like, oh no, how is this going to affect the other characters?
Exactly, and that's part of the fun of those kinds of books. I'm actually, like in the book I'm writing right now, I'm going with one POV for reasons which I will not explain. But in the other books, I need those POVs because I need everybody to see something different, and I want the reader to slowly put the pieces together, even if the characters aren't.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get suspense, that's how you get dread, that's how you get all of those different pieces, and everybody sees something different. Yeah, and so you get a more complete picture of what the situation is, and they bring their own biases into it.
Mm-hmm. Which very is, much like that. Important. Yes. Very important, and it's much like that allegory of the blind people touching the elephant, right? Like they can only describe the part they touched. Elephants are like this.
You've got the one who can see, the one who can hear, and the one that can touch.
Oh, right,
and
yeah.
They can only deal with portions of it, so they all describe it differently because their sensory perception is limited. Mm-hmm. And that's another fun place to play, is when you can't see what it is you're fighting, or can't get a good idea of what it is. You can't touch it because it'll kill you. It makes no sound, so you don't know what it is, because we base a lot of how we react to animals, for instance, by the sounds they make. Mm-hmm. Just like they respond to the sounds that they hear, because it's the old predator-prey thing. But if you're talking about a creature that does not do that, does not vocalize, does not have any kind of sound associated with it, except for maybe if it's moving on a tile floor with talons, it changes things quite a bit. And then what happens when it does start making sound? Why is it making that sound now? How screwed are we? That uncanniness is kind of the bread and butter of writing any kind of horror, thriller kind of sci-fi stuff like I do, or even fantasy. It's just so much fun to play with, because people love it. They love to go in and see that kind of thing. Like, okay, in the Black, I had to use AUVs as a almost a point of view character, because there was nobody down there. There was no way to get humans down there. So we see things from the AUV's point of view, or like you brought up, we see things from the flashlight fish's point of view. We get to see things that humans would not be able to see, and that allows me to give the reader information the characters don't have. Yeah. And it works beautifully.
Yeah, I've never tried to use an animal's point of view or an inanimate robot's point of view, but a non-intelligent robot, let's say. But it is really compelling and kind of it's one of those risks you really took with the Black. It's like, okay, we're gonna get kind of out there, we're gonna do some Michael Crichton meets kind of meets a little bit of Tom Clancy kind of thing with like weird points of view or whatever, where it's like, and it's a kind of risk that really makes that book stand out to me. I mean, I've enjoyed a lot of your other work, but that's one of the things that's the most exceptional about that book as far as technique goes, right? Decisions made anyway. At least if you ask me, it's one of the weirder elements of the book. Let me put it that way. Less commonly seen. Yeah.
It's just a matter of you got a disembodied narrator who's following the fish or following the AUV, and AUV stands for autonomous underwater vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a machine learning vehicle that is capable of going down way down past us to the point where you cannot control it. It has to be automated and go do its tasks as best it understands. Mm-hmm. And that's not really a POV. So basically, the narrator's hitching a ride.
Yeah.
Narrator's hitching a ride with the flashlight fish until it has to get in its brain to tell you what it's thinking instinctually, or how it's going to react to the stimuli it's going to get. And sometimes there's no other way to get that information across. You just kind of have to jump with the creature and say, all right, well, screw it. We need this point of view to get the reader this information, and then we'll kind of move on. And also, as a writer, it provides you a break.
Mm-hmm.
So you can structure the scenes in such a way that you leave the characters, and now here we are at intermission. Now for something completely different, to quote Monty Python. And so we're going to give you this little 5-minute, 10-minute breather, and it breaks up the action. And it also gives you more suspense because you're able to see something that the characters cannot see, and you know that is going to come back. And that's one of the reasons why I try and put a lot of detail in those particular pieces, because I'm showing you something that's going to be important later. And you want to be able to harp on that early so that the reader sees or gets that is important, or they don't forget it. So they don't think that you pulled a factor or something out of your butt when you've got the setup for it.
Right.
So that's another thing I think is really important in sci-fi suspense, horror suspense, whatever suspense you're writing. If there's a gun, it better go off at some point. And all I'm doing in that case is showing you the gun, loading the bullets, and then we'll see when it goes off. And when it goes off, usually that's when we're halfway through the book and everybody's running for their lives.
Yeah, and the thing is, actually, when you put it that way, though, about the points of view, the unusual points of view, they really aren't that different than your other points of view. What they are is they're just detached from a character, like you were saying, and that means you're just approaching it more like an omniscient voice storyteller in a way. For a second or two, for those segments only, which is really fascinating, nonetheless. But it's less strange than I made it sound. Let's be fair. It's not like you're actually it's not like you're trying to, it's like this character, you're telling the story, and it's almost literally, I mean, it's the storyteller that you've created, the voice you're using for that book, but it's almost you in that way, just telling the story of what's happening, almost you in the storytelling sense. It's hard to, as in the voice is almost, it could just be straight you if you wanted it to be. That's what, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, more
if you
or
wanted
less
it to be. Yeah.
I just love the other cool thing about those pieces is that's a way for me to include the science, the biology, show you some cool tech and how it actually works in real life, because AUVs do exist. And there's been some interesting incidents with them. They have one that went down 25,000 feet on its second dive, and it didn't come back up.
Uh-oh.
No, let me rephrase that. It came back up in pieces.
Uh-oh. Oh, that's like that.
And
yeah, I don't know. I don't know, guys. Did it self-terminate, maybe?
No, I don't think they had that built in. I mean, it could have been just
could have learned it learned to destroy itself. It got smart, killed itself.
It could have been an air bubble that didn't get cleared from nitrogen purging. It could have been a mechanical failure. But me, I sit there and I think, okay, what whacked this thing? What thought it was a piece of food? Because that's where my brain goes immediately, is what did this?
Deep sea octopus. 25,000 feet down. It's like, oh, let's play. It's a toy. Let's play with this shit. Or what? No, this is from the humans. It's spying on me. Maybe it was that smart. Giant octopus.
I'm gonna send this back to them. See what they think of this.
It's got a. It's just got on the sides. It's just got scrawled. It's like, don't go so deep. You're diving too deep. Or get off my lawn. Maybe something.
Yeah, get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn.
Well, I mean, just imagine you send something down there, it comes back up, and it's got long scratches in it. Mm-hmm. You're sitting there going, oh, there's something down there that played with it. What do we do?
Yeah, and am I ever going to be able to sleep again?
Yeah, because, if you're sending down a 800-pound drone, it's something jacks it up that bad, you have to wonder exactly what did that.
Oh boy!
Yeah, that's. See, already you got another book in my head. Thanks for that.
That's suspense for you. Come on. It's also, suspense writing really interests me. So this has been a great conversation, Paul. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's making me really, really reconsider where I'm going with the current book. But one of the nice things about a genre like that, though, is a subgenre or like a feeling, an emotional type genre like suspense, is you can sneak it into any other genre if you want.
Yeah, just like horror. And horror and suspense go hand in hand. They really do. You can't have horror in my mind. You cannot really have horror without suspense. Otherwise, it's just splatterpunk.
Absolutely,
and that's not my thing. They go together. The first time you watch Alien, the first time you watch John Carpenter's The Thing, the first time you see any of those kinds of movies, or you read the books like that, you're going to see it. The whole point is to get you to worry about what's around that corner and what is that object going to do next. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and it puts the focus. It's kind of the unique thing about about suspense in particular, is it kind of puts the focus on things that the character cannot control or does not know. And that is what's so powerful about it, because we all experience that in our daily lives. It's one of the reasons it's such a compelling thing. Emotion to convey, if you ask me anyway.
Yeah, but in our regular world or regular lives, we have known unknowns.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
When you start going into this realm, it starts getting really weird really fast, where you have no idea what's coming next. I mean, that's why I love. I can't help but put vents in nearly all of my books, because number one, they're in every structure that we have. And number two, whenever I look at one, I'm like, what's up there? What's living in there I don't know about? It is the adult's monster under the bed.
Yeah, or the thing that like when you go down, like when I go down in the basement, I turn the light off, and all I see is like a tail flicking out of sight around the corner. Yeah, and that's a true story. That just happens. That's what's around. It's a tail with maybe a couple legs on the back. Probably a centipede, but who can say? I only got a glimpse of it. Yeah, and you just get that skittering sound.
The skittering of a cockroach on metal is one of the most terrifying sounds of all time.
Yeah, no,
And
as the dog days of summer creep on, I'm going to be spending more time in my basement, because at least it's cool down there. But this is really making me reluctant to do that. Anyway, because there's a gap in the wall, and that's always so compelling, because we added on to the basement years ago. And when I go down to the basement, you go cross from one room to the other, but there's just a gap. It's too narrow for a human to fit in, but it's still there. And there are things that live in there. I just know it.
It's like the closet that goes way back but gets tinier and tinier as it goes, so you can only go so far. And then there's stuff in there that
who knows?
You just don't want to know about.
Believe it or not, there's one right behind me. One of those closets. Like I can fit maybe 4 feet into the front of it, like maybe a yard or two. And then it's like, no, I can see other stuff in there, but I can't get there.
Not without crawling.
No, I'd have to crawl. And then I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Not in here, that's for sure. And that's one of those things, like, you put the character, like in this case me, off his game by making do something he really never wants to do in the first place, which is crawl on the floor. And now I'm crawling not on the floor, but up some kind of weird just mound of junk, basically, to see what's further into that mound of junk. And that's just, there's a sense of wonder that's also dreadful to that. Because it's exploration, but it's also scary.
I would make the argument exploration has always got always got a tinge of fear and dread with it.
Yeah, or at least you should
Always
in a
does.
book. I mean, if you're doing freeform exploration, yeah, there's always that. Like, what if you find something really worse than you would ever counted on? There's always that possibility, you know.
Yeah, even if you go into the forest, it's like you don't expect to see a bear. Doesn't necessarily mean you won't.
Yes.
But again, that's a known unknown, right?
Right.
It's you expect that you're going to see critters.
Or you
Just-
you sit down by a tree and you realize you're sitting next to a skull.
Yeah, or that tree looks like a skull. That knot looks
there
like
you
a
go.
skull.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, what druid came down here and messed with a nymph or whatever, and why do we have this here, and how terrified should I be?
Yeah.
And that's the
on
other
a scale
thing
of
is,
1 to
is
10.
we see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, on a
exactly.
scale of 1 to 10. So if you have characters and you can play with what they see in the shapes and darkness, I stared at a sock years ago thinking it was one of the cats. And then I got up and I moved toward it because it looked weird and it didn't move. And I was like, what the hell is that? And it was just because it was late at night. I was tired. I had just kind of woken up from a weird dream. But the thing was, it looked uncanny. It was
there's
a
a word for
sock.
you. Yeah.
It was a sock.
Anything
But
can be
then-
uncanny. Yeah.
If you get in the right light or lack thereof and shadow, that's where you get the indeterminacy, and that's where you kind of have to live.
That's an excellent point. And a note to go out on, let's say. So, Paul, tell people where they can find your books and where they should look for your podcast, all that stuff. Let people know where they can find you online.
You can find me at shadowpublications.com. You can obviously Google me or go to Amazon for Paul E. Cooley. Find the Derelict Saga, The Black, Gears Inferno, which is much more of a modern, well, set in today's world. That one in Closet Treats. You can find all of that there. The podcast has been going for a long ass time, and Derelict is now heading into. Derelict, I'm also on YouTube, youtube.com/Paul E. Cooley, where you can find, oh my God, all the Black Books as podcasts, as well as Derelict, which is now on episode 121.
Holy cow.
122. Yeah.
That's just
Damn.
the one series. Got over 120 episodes of that one series. Wow.
Yes. And it's probably going to max out, I think, at 140.
Oh, we're getting near
that's
the
right.
end, folks. It's on double red
Yeah,
stripe.
We're getting near the end. We're almost into. We are actually in the second half of Trident, but it's got a while to go.
Yeah, that's still a long way. That's still, what is it? You release an episode once a week, so you still got half the year left. But hey, maybe
I've got at
2022.
least-
Yeah.
Yeah, I've still got probably three months of content, and yeah, it's just going to be nuts. So that's where you can find me and my work and yada yada, and you can also find me in all the podcast places, iTunes, whatever else.
Well, excellent. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, Paul. It's been awesome. And as for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellularpublications.com. You can find my books on amazon.com in ebook, or you can get them in print just about anywhere. Print-on-demand books can be purchased. I use Drafted Digital for that, so if anyone wants to know how it's easy to distribute, just check that out. We're not sponsored, but, it's worth mentioning. So, because I know a lot of writers listen to this podcast. So if you ever want to make a print book kind of easy and quick, there's Drafted Digital. Jeez, I'm doing an ad. Okay, anyway, I'm out. Thanks for listening, everybody. Stay safe out there, and have a good week. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
That tears it.